While strolling through the evening streets of Moscow, I decided to stop by a pub and have a pint of beer before heading back to the hotel. My attention was drawn to a man sitting alone at a table in the corner. He seemed visibly upset. As there were very few available seats, I approached him and asked if I could join. He looked at me with a bewildered expression and nodded. His name was Andrei. I discreetly inquired about what had happened, and he shared his story with me. I want to tell you a story that left a mark on my life. One might say, changed it once and for all. A month ago, I had the opportunity to work on a shift in the Siberian forest. The work consisted of the following: once a month, for a week, we were taken to the wilderness, about 70 kilometers from the nearest populated area. And even that was a remote village with broken, rickety houses, where at most 20 old people lived. We had to prepare a hut and a bathhouse for the men who, in turn, spent 3 weeks a month cutting down trees. We chopped wood, replenished the water supply from the nearby stream, and repaired the buildings. The workload was overwhelming, and there were only 2 of us, my partner and me. Not everyone would fancy such a job. Yes, the pay was good, but it was just a temporary gig, and my partners often changed, passing this damn job on to others. Now I realize I should have paid more attention to that. So one of these shifts brought me together with a young guy named Slavka. Tall, sturdy, a typical hard-working fellow. It was winter, in December. The extreme cold hadn't set in yet, but it was freezing, and the snow was already piled in drifts knee-deep throughout the entire forest. The driver dropped us off at the hut and drove away. We decided to start working the next day, and for now, just settle in, have a drink, and talk. Get to know each other. It should be noted that Slavka wasn't particularly talkative. Seemed sensible, seemed kind, but still, he listened more than he spoke. Honestly, I don't like that trait in people. Well, let it be. It's not for me to judge. We had a drink, talked, and it seemed like it was time to go to sleep, but he started putting on his clothes. I asked him, "Where are you heading in the middle of the night?" He replied, "I'm just take a short walk before bed, and then I'll be back." Strange, but all right, I thought, turned away, and drifted off to sleep. I woke up. It was still dark. Slavka nudged me and said, "Get up, it's time to work." Dividing the tasks between the 2 of us, we headed to work. I was supposed to cut an ice hole in the stream, from which we would later draw water, while Slavka was to start chopping firewood. I went to a small stream about 4 meters wide. It was situated behind a small hill from the hut in a narrow ravine, with a pine forest on both sides of the stream. The stream was covered with a thick layer of ice, and the good thing was that there was a beaten path leading to it. Otherwise, we would have had to walk through the snowdrifts. A slightly frozen ice hole was visible in the middle of the stream. Apparently, the men, after steaming in the bathhouse, often went for a dip in this stream. That's why the path was wide, and the ice hole was quite substantial and not completely frozen. I chopped through it with an axe, filled 2 buckets with water, and headed back to the hut. Slavka was vigorously wielding the axe in the yard, having already chopped a considerable amount of firewood. I thought that maybe we would finish faster than in a week, and we might even get some rest before leaving. After filling several big buckets, I decided to go for water one last time that day and then take a break. It was getting dark, and I wasn't too keen on working in the dark. When I descended to the stream, I noticed an interesting detail. There were tracks leading to the ice hole from the opposite bank. It was certainly surprising, but I thought that I might not have noticed these tracks earlier, and most likely, they were left by the men from the previous shift. Who knows where they needed to go? And I just didn't pay attention all day. Things like that can happen. I reassured myself with this thought, collected water, and headed back to the hut. I was so convinced of it that I didn't even ask Slava if those were his tracks. On the other hand, he had nothing to do at the stream. We spent the evening in silence. No one talked about anything. Each of us was occupied with our own tasks. I was reading a book, and Slavka was lying on the bed, silently staring at the ceiling, presumably lost in thought. Before going to sleep, Slava, just like the previous evening, started dressing silently. I asked, "Going for some fresh air again?" He grunted somewhat gloomily and slammed the door behind him. I don't like such silent and withdrawn people, especially being alone with them in the taiga. But there was nothing I could do. The shift needed to be completed. I immersed myself in the book again and didn't notice how an hour or so passed. Looking at the clock, I was quite surprised. Was he wandering around in the darkness somewhere? Where and why is he going? Just to get some fresh air. But that takes about 15 minutes at most. Putting on my jacket, I stepped onto the porch for a smoke, surveying the dark forest. My eyes couldn't catch anything. Slava had indeed disappeared somewhere. I couldn't see or hear anything around. I got a little scared. Did he get lost? But I had no desire to go looking for him. I went to bed and once again fell into a deep sleep after a long day. In the morning, Slava woke me up again. I stretched in bed and reluctantly started getting ready to go outside. When I asked him where he had disappeared to for so long yesterday, he gave an unclear answer. Walked. That's where the conversation ended. I was fetching water again, and he continued chopping wood as before. By midday, something happened that alarmed and frightened me. I went to the stream again for water and noticed the same tracks leading to the ice hole. Thinking about those tracks while filling the bucket with water, I accidentally dropped it. It sank to the bottom. Taking off my jacket and rolling up my sleeves, I began to search the stream bed with my hands. Fortunately, the stream was shallow, and the current had only carried the bucket a short distance. After 10 minutes of effort, I managed to retrieve it from the stream and started putting on my jacket again. After cursing, I took the buckets and turned to go back to the hut. And that's when I noticed new tracks. They came from the same bank I came from, but slightly to the right of my path. The tracks led out of the forest. They definitely weren't there before. So during the 10 minutes I was dealing with the bucket, someone came out of the woods, looked at me, and went back. I squinted into the forest but didn't see anything. Goosebumps ran down my spine. It was extremely unsettling to comprehend this situation. The only thing I could do was assume that it was Slavka who came. I ran to the hut. Slava was chopping wood. I asked him if it was him, but he denied it, probably thinking I was joking with him. I took him to the ice hole and showed him the tracks. We both scratched our heads, stood there, pondered, but couldn't find any explanations. The nearest village, as I already mentioned, was very far from us. If someone had come or passed by, we wouldn't have been able to miss it. There was only one road. We decided to go together from then on, but we didn't go for water that day. Instead, we decided to finish chopping wood. The evening of that day passed calmly. Slava stayed in the hut this time. Most likely, he was also uneasy about the situation, and we spent the whole evening speculating about where those unfortunate tracks could have come from. In the morning, we worked as a pair. We spent the first half of the day fetching water and the second half chopping wood. We finished the majority of the work. That day passed without any incidents, except that in the evening Slava seemed to be getting ready to go somewhere again. The thought that he might once again venture into the dark forest for several hours, walking who knows where through huge snowdrifts, made me uneasy. Or perhaps he's just walking along the road that leads to our hut. But that didn't make me feel any better. And those mysterious tracks. Maybe you'll stay this time? After all, we still haven't figured out where those tracks came from, I said to him. I'll be back soon, he replied and walked out the door. That night, he never returned. After waiting for him for 3 or 4 hours, I couldn't wait any longer, so I went to sleep. I didn't feel like going into the forest to look for him. The next morning, he was still missing. I was worried, very worried. I went into the forest, spent half a day trying to find him, but didn't come across any traces. Then I thought that maybe he had indeed taken the well-trodden road that led towards the village. However, after walking several kilometers along it, I found no one and realized that I was exhausted, having been on my feet since morning. Only one thought crossed my mind. Perhaps he went to the village and started drinking there? Yes, the thought was fun, and it couldn't possibly be true, but it somehow comforted me a bit, and that was enough. I couldn't do anything. There was no point in even thinking about communication with the outside world in the taiga. The vehicle was supposed to come for us in 3 days, but after inspecting the surroundings again, I still didn't find Slavik or any traces of him. It was already getting dark, and I belatedly realized that I should have run to the village in the morning to call for rescuers. I decided to return to the hut and wake up early in the morning to head to the village. Approaching the hut, I felt an anxious sensation. My head was spinning with unanswered questions. What happened to Slavik? Where did he go? Where did he disappear to? Where did those tracks near the ice hole come from? I entered the hut, lit the stove, and began warming up. After a while, footsteps outside disrupted my thoughts. Someone was walking through the snow. I was overjoyed like a child, with a shout of, "Slavik!" I jumped to my feet, ran to the exit, opened the door, and dashed outside. And my joy was instantly replaced by horror. At a distance of 10 meters from the hut stood, no, it couldn't have been a person. I still can't understand what I encountered face to face back then. In the nighttime forest, in the dim light of the moon, its eyes shone like 2 bright coals. But even those eyes were not as frightening as its mouth. It was enormous, giving the impression that it was grinning. Its teeth were sharp, like fangs. Its body was black, consisting of nothing but veins, and its arms were long with very large fingers and elongated claws. It was of enormous height, towering above me by 3 or maybe 4 heads. I don't know how long we stared at each other. It felt like an entire eternity, but in reality it was probably just 2 or maybe 3 seconds. I quickly rushed into the hut, slammed the door shut, and locked it abruptly. At that moment, a wild scream echoed from behind the door. I immediately darted to a corner with my heart pounding, grabbing a knife from the table. I could hear footsteps in the snow. The creature was circling around the hut. After a few minutes, I started hearing multiple footsteps simultaneously. There were 2, maybe 3 of them. I sat there, pressed against the wall, in complete panic. Suddenly, someone hit the wall so hard that the kerosene lamp fell from the shelf. At the same moment, someone began knocking on the window. I fell to the floor face down, gripping the knife in my hand until it hurt. Afraid to look at the window. I didn't want to see that terrifying face again. I don't know how long I lay like that. Someone walked around the hut, knocking on the door, the walls, the window, and it continued all night while I lay on the floor, covering my face with my hands, crying in terror. Now it seems to me that they just wanted to frighten me, because they could have smashed the window or tried to break down the door, but they didn't do any of that, just circled around the hut. In the morning, everything fell silent. Even then, I didn't dare to go outside. It seemed to me that even if I went to the village, I wouldn't make it back before dark, and perhaps even the daylight didn't scare them. Because, as it seems to me, someone from among them went to the ice hole precisely during the day. I didn't dare to go to the village. For 3 days, I didn't go outside and didn't unlock the door. I was afraid. I didn't eat during those 3 days, but I didn't even feel hunger, only a wild fear. For 3 days, I was afraid to look out the window. I was afraid that no one would come for me, that I would remain here alone in the forest. I was afraid that those creatures would come again at night, but it didn't happen. After 3 days, a car came for me. They took me away in terrible condition. Slavik was declared missing, and after a week, volunteers found him about 10 kilometers from the hut in the woods, or rather, what was left of him. His body was deformed. No, he wasn't gutted, eaten, or cut. He was hanging from a tree, or rather, stuck there. His body was stretched. It's hard to even imagine, but the torso, arms, legs, and neck were stretched like chewing gum that has been chewed and wound around a finger. The eyes were gouged out, and there was no lower jaw. What happened to his body was unthinkable. I saw the photos during the interrogation. After all, I was the one with him in the hut, and I was the primary suspect. Subsequently, Slavka's cause of death was attributed to an unidentified natural elemental phenomenon, and the case was closed. I didn't tell them about the monsters I saw in that forest. I was afraid they would just throw me in the loony bin. I only mentioned that Slava went into the night and that someone was walking around the hut, frightening me immensely. Since then, my life has turned upside down. I'm afraid of everything. Afraid of silence, darkness, the forest. That face still haunts my nightmares, and I can't do anything about it. I'm only grateful that I didn't end up in Slava's place.